money, yada, yada, yada. Hey, for the activities that we were, or because we had a lot of classes together, we were interested in doing group activities. But it's just kind of one of those situations where if you get an answer correct and we call on your table, you all will get a ticket. Yay! So this is supposed to be a millionaire. If you're not, every there are lifelines. We will let you use the lifelines. The lifelines will work as follows. Lifelines will the whole room. Meaning if the room has already used that lifeline, you can't use it, it's dead. The phone a friend in this lifeline will allow you to ask another people for assistance. So if you have a colleague or someone you're like, we don't know the answer, you may do. You may phone a friend. Now, if you don't know, you have to take it wrong, but if you take it wrong. There is no limitation of everything, your play, like articles, one more thing, if you got that, and hold the audience. Hold the audience. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question is traditionally the fastest finger question. But this particular question, there is no fastest finger here. There's us drawing. We will just draw a number and treat this as a traditional question. That being said, I don't have a 50-50 slide set up for this one, so it's one of the lifelines all of a sudden you want your non-attention. So the first question is, which of these is not a funding code in Teams? Which of these is not a funding code in Teams? So talk amongst your table, and I'm going to ask my trusted assistant to pick a card. But we will be going in order from 1 to 5. So, question number 1. Which funding code is used for basic AFLA-funded literacy services? Which funding code is used for basic AFLA-funded literacy services? Talk amongst your table, talk amongst your table. Anson, pick a card, any card? Anson is on table 5. Table 5. Yeah, right here. Table 5. All right, table 5, look at me.
We're going to go with A.
All right.
What?
I'm going to encourage you to use the lifeline.
We're going with Steve.
Steve, yell civics, are they right? Oh, that was worse. All right, next question. You are providing a class where you are teaching a group of students English at their workplace, which is a distribution center. You are using regular ASWA Section 231 funds. Which funding code should you use in tracking these students' time in teams? I'm going to go ahead and say the class is 60 hours in length. If that helps anybody. Which funding code? All right, you have to pick a card. Table number 8. All right. Back here? Right here. All right, that's going to be
B.
we're mixed up. Sorry, that is the correct answer. Congratulations. All right, next question. You are providing re-entry services to individuals who are transitioning out of incarceration. Which funding code should you use? This is a tricky one, because this is new. You may have to do some 50-50 or pull the audience on this one. All right, Hanson. Number 14, table 14. Over here, that's all. All right, table 14, this is a tricky one.
Yes.
Remember, you've got some lifelines left, you've got a 50-50, and you've got a pull the audience. 50-50 will take away two of them. Can we do a pull the audience? Let's do a pull the audience. So if you think the correct answer is A, raise your hand. The correct answer is A, raise it high, raise it C. Again, you're providing re-entry services. Okay, if you think the correct answer is B, raise your hand high, raise them high. C, raise them high. D, raise them high. Hey, I'm going to give you a hint. Don't listen to the audience.
We're going to give up words because we're not listening to the audience. A.
That includes both the activity and the source of funds. They're almost all structured that way with the exception of the ones we carry forward from EA, which remember changes in this parentheses. Much easier to understand the funding code if you know the general source of the general structure. Congratulations, everybody give yourself a round of applause. All right. So we're now going to move into some more derived content. So I put it down and I pulled up, I gave her the thumbs up and trying to hand it out. I believe that's coming out. I see it being passed around. This was supposed to be talked about yesterday afternoon, but unfortunately we had too many good questions going on, so we didn't get to it. So this is related to big changes in year 4, and I'm going to say right now, I would greatly appreciate lots of deep breaths. Lots of deep breaths. We're all in this together. I know it's coming around right now. But I'm going to start with something we talked about yesterday, I believe, in some detail, and we'll get into a little bit more detail in a bit. This has to do with counting of participant contact hours. So as we mentioned yesterday, which was welcome news for a lot of you, once a participant is a participant, they're always a participant until they're not a participant anymore. So the period of participation for a participant just has to deal with their own period of participation. I could probably do a full day on period of participation. I'm not, because you all would hate me a lot more than anything. So we're going to focus on just the gist, which is once anyone gets 12 hours, once someone gets 12 hours, they are now a participant. So if I get 12 hours in June, I'm a participant, and that period of participation doesn't go away in the next program year. So the good is that it makes it a little bit easier, because if they get 12 hours this year, and they come back for 1 hour next year, they're a participant next year. They are now a participant. Now, I'm going to stress, this deals with total participation. It does not deal with your individual targets. Those are all built around a 12-hour rule in that unique activity, because we have to make sure that we're not running into a situation where people are doing like 1 hour of an IEP and getting credit for doing IEP, because you're not. While 12 hours is not a sufficient IEP, it still provides us a participation marker for that unique activity. But for your total participation, once a participant is a participant, they're a participant until they're not. Now, you have down here, hours aren't carried forward if they aren't a participant in the previous year. Let me explain this. So if I get 6 hours this year, and I come back next year and get 6 hours, I'm not a participant, because I was never a participant in the previous year. That's a tricky one. So that period of participation, the way the clock kind of starts, means those hours, they are cumulative once they're a participant, but there's no like adding and piecing things together and things of that nature. Now, remember our good friend Teams. Teams is a little slow to pick up on stuff. Teams does not like anything that is not related to program here. Everything in Teams revolves around the program here. There is not a piece of coding in Teams that is not some way tied to the program here. So what we're doing right now is we're working diligently to see if we can at least change some of the reports to count the hours that way. So that as we we are counting as you are seeing participants, you know, yes, they were participants here, yes, they were participants here. Our Division of Operational Insight is already set up to count participants this way. So, great news, they're ready to go, and they will be counting participants this way moving forward. We will be providing 5-participant reports, and I'm working on some quote-unquote fun tools so that you can use what's available in Teams to kind of piece together lists of participants to know, yes, participant is a participant this year, yes, they will be next year. I know that's not ideal, not everything you want, it's what we got right now. But once a participant is a participant, they're a participant moving forward. Now, the way that applies, starting this next year, starting July 1st, if you have folks that were participants this year that we're in right now, and you enroll the next year and they sit down in class, they're now a participant, and they're in your measurable skill game denominator. So that's the one piece you need to keep in mind. The other piece that's really, really important is that while certain things only apply to a period of participation, so you only have one exit for a period of participation, meaning you only have to get one credential for that period of participation. There's one measure of employment, no matter how long it lasts. Measurable skill gains are measured every single year. So if you have a participant that's in your program for 4 program years, they're going to need 4 measurable skill gains across those program years. Those could be a variety of measurable skill gains. They may get a pre-post test 1 year, then they get their high school equivalency, then they get a number 5, and then they pass a different exam and get another number 5 in the next year. But a participant will need a measurable skill gain every single program year. So keep that in mind. Okay, here's the fun part. Here's where I'm asking you to please put away your potatoes, hard objects, fruit, things of that nature. I would greatly appreciate it. We have had a lot of conversations about this with the Department of Ed, and they have confirmed with us that orientation is just that. It's orientation. It's not under the definition of a direct contact hour. So just to clarify, the definition of a direct contact hour are hours of instruction or instructional activity that the learner receives from the program, including classroom instruction, tutoring, or participation in a learning lab. Deep breath. Deep breath. Orientation hours don't count as direct contact hours. I know, I should have taken all the toys out of the building. So, in 2 minutes, 4 minutes. Awesome. Thank you. So, a little more about the history of orientation hours being counted as direct contact hours provided by.
Well, this was kind of a big surprise for us. It's sometimes you just do things and just kind of accept them. I have understood that this was changed when the Department of Education was really counting the states about the time of hours between pre-post testing as a way to get more hours for students. So sometime back in the history, the PEA changed that calculation. And when we transferred it over, we didn't question it. So, yeah, that's a big reset. one that going to probably challenge a lot of like your traditional program. So, if y'all would be willing to do questions.
Sure.
You can take questions on there for clarification. We have some mic there.
Okay, I just want to ask when this is effective. I think my primary concern when I look at this is that for some programs, my own program included, our orientation was very instructional, and that was when we did goal setting and started and used for assessment.
That's an excellent point. So that's an excellent point. And so I want to go back to the definition of a direct hour. And so a lot of programs have really been working to make their orientation very robust. So think very carefully about now, kind of moving forward. Where's my direct? There. Well, is it direct contact hours? Have we been providing direct contact hours? And if you are, log them as direct contact hours. So if you're doing something that can be considered classroom instruction, and again, if you're not sure of the content applies, just ask, happily answer. But if you're doing something, and we have a lot of programs that are doing direct instruction as a part of their orientation, which is awesome, I love it, ask yourself, does this count towards direct instruction? Now, keep in mind, when you're thinking about the content that has to do with direct instruction, content, the intent of that direct instruction is to make a mental skill game. You kind of have to ask yourself, okay, maybe we're providing instruction, but is it direct instruction, or is it more of a, under the category of workforce preparation activity, which, if you're not, if you don't have the definition handy, includes things like digital literacy, soft skills, like a place, preparation for college transition, employment transition, things of that nature. So you need to ask yourself, so if you're doing something like goal setting, that's probably not going to fall under that instructional definition. But if you're doing something that ties in instruction that could be meaningful towards that measurable skill game, then you're doing direct instruction, but you need to log it out of class as direct instruction. We are going to talk about logging orientation in just a second here, so let's focus the questions on the content of orientation. Do we have a follow-up? And we have a
Right. I just have the one question about when does this go into
effect? So it goes into effect July 1st, meaning starting July 1st, the old rules are already in place. Those participants have been counted, they've been added as participants. We're not going to tease anything apart. We don't have a way to tease anything apart. But starting July 1st, if it's logged orientation hours, we will not be considered as direct hours. But keep in mind, and I'm going to show you a workaround in Teams. Teams is still looking for those hours right now. Oh, hi, sorry. Keep in mind that little piece, but I'm going to show you that in a minute. But ask yourself, if you built this really robust orientation, which is a good thing, is it direct instruction? Is it maybe more of a class? Or is it truly just, here's a handbook, or here's assessment, or things of that nature? One thing I do want to say, lost it. Dale asked a question.
You may be getting ready to answer this question, but we are so dependent on Teams to tell us when our students hit that 60-hour mark.
Absolutely.
So are those orientation hours going to be pushed out?
Right. So I'm going to show you just a minute where, and this is huge, this will be something you will want to print, take back to your staff, take back to the data entry folks. But in terms of tracking, I'm going to show you in just a minute to answer just that question. One thing I did do with a lot of the trends we were seeing around retention. And I was hoping to pull all the data and put it all together and have an organized review, but it just didn't happen. But essentially, what we're seeing is there's a lot of students who get through 12 hours of orientation, but the second they get to that 1 hour of class time, they're like, ugh, I don't like this. And they're gone, and now you have some of the things you're denominator for measurable skill gains, measurable skill gains through this. There's a lot of that happening. Could be happening for a variety of reasons. It's because the orientation is not addressing what they're actually going to see in class. But the whole intent behind the 12 direct contact hours before they're a participant is to give people a tryout phase. To let them see, is this for me? Is this going to work? Is the schedule going to work? Is it going to work with my childcare? Is it going to work with my job? Am I going to be able to do it? And if a student just comes to 3 days and, just sees that little bubble, it may be really hard for them to gauge until they're actually doing it, if it's going to work for them. If that particular thing is going to be something that's going to work in their world. So that's where a lot of the conversation first started, is because we have a lot of people who are getting through orientation perfectly, but the direct hours are like this, but they're still being counted because we've got this kind of historical practice of counting those hours, which they should not be counted. They're not direct instruction. So we're using WIOA as a good opportunity to fix that, to address that, to adjust that. But I will say a lot of the conversations that we had related to this were related to enrollment. We had a big discussion related to enrollment, related to this. The one thing we also looked at, though, is how many people will still be considered a participant that wouldn't have been before because they're being carried over from the next year. And it's a pretty nice balance. Pretty interesting to see the numbers and the way they work out. So it's kind of like a good news, bad news situation. On one hand, you're getting a boost. On the other hand, you're getting kind of not a boost. But I will say, I do think we're going to see an improvement in retention for actual people that make it to the point of participation. I think we're going to see some move. So let's talk about what this actually looks like. Under WIOA, career services that are applicable to APLA include orientation. They also include initial assessment, including both formal and aptitude, abilities, and supportive service need assessments, i.e. your initial intake, referrals, things like that. Referral to and coordination of activities with other programs and services, provision of performance information and program course information. This really has to do more with even CAA, right? It's definitely going to consider very commonly with CAA services, Title I, and things like that. The course bullet. Provision of performance information and program cost information on eligible providers of information and things like that. But essentially providing program information is considered a career service, and provision of information on availability of supportive services for assistance and appropriate referrals. And I want to stress the critical thing about career services under WIOA and the applicable ones to Title II is those do not extend the period of participation, nor do they start a period of participation. It's that direct contact hour that starts the period of participation. So if you just do an initial assessment on someone, they're a referable individual, but they're not a participant yet. You've got to get that 12 direct contact hour point for that participant. So what does this mean for you starting July 1st? What actually needs to happen? So as I mentioned previously, there's a workaround that is going to take good communication with your class or with your staff. Do not use this space on the participant profile to track orientation beginning July 1st. Don't go in and take anything out. We're not telling you to I mentioned previously, career services is orientation, but it's a whole lot of other stuff too. Under the new location, where students will have all of their career and training services, which when you click on a participant profile, and you see those little blue things at the top, there will be a link that says career and training services. Click on that. There is now a new location where you can track all career services for a participant. So you can track referral. You can track provision of programs information, and you can track orientation in this location. It is equally under that definition of orientation, not direct contact hours. I want to make a point about this second bullet. We are not expecting you to double entry assessment, double enter assessment. There's no need to, when you provide that initial assessment, to add a record here. By all means, if you want to, you can. In the future, we plan on typing that in. This just wasn't a priority right now. But we know when that assessment happens, to track that elsewhere. That's where it happens. Good deal. We got it. It's covered. You don't need to add it here, but you can if you really want to. We won't tell you it's where it is. The fun thing about this, or the nice thing about this, is it gives a little bit of functionality regarding referrals to supportive services, which programs have wanted, I know, for a very long time. It allows you to add in the type of service you're doing, who's providing that service, so if you are making a referral to a partner, you can indicate that. And I'm sorry, correction, you're still providing service, disregard what I just said. You can indicate that in the note. So again, you're going to indicate what is the service type, who's providing that service, same list of drop-down providers that you have elsewhere. But in the comments, you can say, I said so-and-so to so-and-so on this date, and this is what happened. It's a pretty big text block where you can continue to store information for that participant. You can see referrals, things like that you have done to the participant, almost like a case note feature. So that is where career services or orientation will now be tracked. So I've got a question here, and then I've got a question up here. So let's go in the back first.
Will there be a report where we can export this information? So if we wanted to track how many referrals we get for support service?
Yes. There will be a report for everything when I don't know. The one nice thing, and I know they're live streaming, so hopefully they won't be waiting for me with any, okay.
If I hold it, is that better? Yesterday I was too loud, y'all. I can't win. I'm just all over the place. I know. I want to go join. So, what in the world were we talking about? Report. So, our Division of Operational Insight, and I know some of them are watching, so I'm nervous to say this, but I will say they're amazing, and I love them, and I like to send them the cookies, and they're awesome. But they have worked really awesomely with us to develop reports for things that aren't in the system yet. So where we can't get drop-down reports, we're getting lots of other types of reports that they're developing, which is going to be very useful as a kind of Band-Aid. Obviously, you've got to wait on us to send it to you, which is annoying. It's not as user-friendly. But all of this is in the works. I promise. I just don't have it yet. But excellent question, because obviously you will want to track. You will want to be able to see what are the services that we refer for an individual. Good question. Up here.
Along the same lines, you're afraid to ask, what type of documentation would be
Good question. Excellent question. So, and I'm looking at Mahalia, because we actually had this exact conversation, and I'm not sure we landed in the same location as we had in our orientation. Yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that, and that's how I'm going to monitor questions to confirm, because originally you needed very specific documentation for orientation because it aligns with hours. Now that it's not aligning to hours, things are a little bit different. I know for sure on the referrals and all of that, you don't need anything. Assessment, it would be your same stuff that you have now. Let me double check on the orientation. I don't believe it's anything because it's not a thing anymore. That being said, there still is a requirement in your contract that you're providing orientation. So for that reason, at least in your current contract, you would need some kind of documentation. So let me stress that point really, really officially here. You've obviously got all this new stuff in Teams, new stuff under the Pearl, new stuff like that. You still got your contract, and your contract explicitly states that there is a requirement to do orientation. You have to do something. You can do as little as 3 hours, but you have to do something. So you still need documentation to be in line with your contract. The issue relates to the hours and all of that, and you still need a sign-in sheet and yada, yada, yada. So my best judgment is gonna be do what you've been doing right now until you hear otherwise. That's always gonna be my best guidance. Do what you're doing now until we tell you otherwise. Yes, ma'am.
Do we know when this year's Teams is gonna be rolled over, and when will we be able to begin inputting data?
So here's always my internal struggle I have. So beginning with last year, we were actually given control over opening the new year, which was huge. We used to have to wait on developers to do it and had to wait for them to be able to do it, and now I have all the power, which really stresses me out. I struggle with this because having 2 years open at the same time is sticky and can lead to a lot of data entry issues. But now that we have moved into this phase of all this new data, I know the need is there to have that open as soon as possible. And I have it, give me a second, I'm pulling out my calendar. It's not going to be July 1st because that's a weekend. And I love you guys, but I'm going to take that weekend off. I'm saying tentatively, and I will send a formal message, but I am saying tentatively in this room so that everybody can be like, you said, that Monday, which is July 3rd. So again, I'm saying that tentatively, mainly because I just want to make sure all the kinks are worked out, there's no issues, things aren't going to explode, things are going to catch on fire, all that good stuff, because there is a lot of functionality that is directly tied to that new year. But I think tentatively right now, July 3rd, I'm going to say at the very latest, it would be that Friday, the 7th. But I'm going to say the 3rd. We'll get that decision finalized, and we'll broadcast it just so folks know, and then we'll broadcast it when it actually happens to say it's here. It's open, you can start. But I think very tentatively right now the 3rd. Yes, ma'am. Oh, over here. All right, go for it.
Okay, this is referring to the slide on page 4 at the top. The very last bullet point says services across months. So
Yes, so good question. So we haven't gotten to this yet, and I'm glad you brought it up because we do need to get to it. So this is another really fun thing. So we had this issue when we were programming this where you have to put an end date because otherwise we run into situations where people open a service and never close it. And while these services right now don't continue a period of participation under current guidance, that could change. We may get some clarification on some of that. So the last thing we would want is people that have services open and it looks like that person has been in that service for 800 years. The issue, obviously, though, is that putting a close date is that the way this gets reported, because this does get reported, it doesn't continue continue participation, but it does get reported. It gets reported under the DOL Pearl quarterly. So, because of that, we've got to end on a month so that we can do data together on a monthly basis to then get to the monthly quarter. What that means is, if you have a service that crosses the month, you're going to have to enter 2 services. What? I know. I don't love that. I would say very firmly that was not my decision.
Carrie, I have a question.
Yes.
So we know orientation is in your list of services.
Yeah.
Referrals.
Yeah.
Give us some examples of what types of services are going to be in that drop down.
This is literally, let me pull it up here. This is literally the drop down right here. Now, the definition within these drop downs, so like this last one is like this long. So we can share that with you, and we can share it in the materials that we post for the event. It's like this long because it includes like, for example, TANF, Medicaid. That's like it has just this much information in it, which we couldn't put in the drop down. But the referral is big and long, but this is essentially the list. So you would need to figure out which category the service you're providing falls under. And if you're not sure, just ask. And I'll probably have to ask someone else, but I will get you an answer. Does that answer it before we move on? You good? Okay, awesome. Back here.
Good question, yeah. I want to back up and talk about orientation one more time. Did we have to have 12 direct hours for our distance learning people?
So those 12 hours need to include some type of direct activity. Now, I will say, and I can send you the information from the current NRS, like what they say that has to be, or what it can be, or what it can't be. But they have very specific language in there about what those 12 hours can and cannot consist of. But it can be things that are synchronous, but are not necessarily in person. The purpose of the direct hours, and the way it's written in the NRS, and I know because I was literally just looking at it, it has to do with things like verifying that the individual is the individual that's doing distance learning and things like that. So I'm going to put let me get you that language, and then we can get some additional questions and information out about that, because I know that's going to be a sticking point. And I think we talked about that when we talked about this.
Also, we need a PowerPoint meeting with all of you.
Yes, this will be added. Yep, absolutely. And any changes we've made to any of the PowerPoints or anything like that, we'll upload the most recent version. There really haven't been any content changes, with the exception of our credentials one, which we're doing in just a minute. Yes, ma'am.
Gary,
Yes.
I apologize if you've already answered this because my head is sort of spinning. I might have missed it. On these lists of career services,
Yes.
number 1 pretty much signifies what we do on day 1 of our orientation, and number 2 signifies what we do on day 2.
Mm-hmm.
Can we choose more than one from that drop-down list, or do we need to do 2 different entries?
You would need to do 2 different entries, but the second one, you don't have to do an entry for, because you're logging that assessment on the assessment screen. Now, again, if you really, really want to, or if you're wanting to say, like, we assessed this person and we determined they needed, additional services from VR, or things like that, you would definitely be able to, or we would encourage you to log that here, but you don't have to log the 2 different things.
So we can put that in the notes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that note screen, and man, Juana, bless her heart, I have to give her props. She verified that character count. She was like, it's totally, I think it's 255, right? And man, she was testing, she was like, 251, test, 250, I mean, she, bless her heart, she made sure it worked right, but I think it's 255 characters in that box. So it's working.
I'm assuming we still have to have 3 hours of orientation for each student, but I'm looking at both of the screens we have in the handout. I don't see any place to set hours.
There's not a place to set hours. Again, that is the So in terms of hours, you would need to put those in the notes, like how many hours was actually happening.
So we have to have backup documentation, the timing sheet. So would we just put in there, we had orientation from 9 to 12?
Yeah, or you could just say 3 hours, if that's easier. So you would basically use that note, kind of like you're using that hours place right now on the participant profile, and just put 3 hours. Now again, if you wanted to put more, by all means, please, we welcome it. Okay, I'm gonna pull up, we have time for one more question. But again, we will be here, I promise. I'm not leaving right after the event. I will be here to take any and all questions or tomatoes or whatever you gotta do. Stephanie?
Can you go back a couple of slides to the slide that says career services definition?
Is it this one? Is it this one?
Yes.
Yes.
Two bullets, provision of, can you define them?
I can send you the definition, because I don't have them handy.
But in a nutshell, is that anything we do?
So in a nutshell, that provision of program cost information and program information, there's a little more detail if you look at slide 10. It gives you kind of, it just explains, and Anson is better, so.
How many times have I missed the 17? The last two are essentially workforce center type activity. So the bottom, 1, 2, 3, the fourth one, provision of program information and program cost information. That's the kind of exercise when there's a dislocated worker and they're choosing to go into training and they're eligible for the eligible training provider system. They have an individual training account. And the case manager will walk with the individual and say like, oh, here are these programs for welding. This is what they cost. They'll work in your IKA. It could be in another context, talking to the student about entry into college and what tuition costs and how does that, doing the budget for the FAFSA or whatever, and working around that. And then the second one, supportive services, again, in workforce, more germane workforce service, that is referrals to things like child care, transportation services, things like that. So probably very rare occurrences of that in adult education, but we list all of the ones under adult.
Okay, so with that, I do, and Anson, you're up. I do want to move into credentials because we have a lot to talk. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This presentation isn't over. That was my fault. Because we have just more good news. I've learned that it's really important to end with good news. So, this is Learning Call Center. Yeah. So first off, just a reminder, and this gets back to that, listen to us, not hearsay. It's now open to all participants, but it's just for math. It's also for math. Even if they're not enrolled in adult education literacy, they can participate, but we still have to make sure they're eligible for adult education literacy. They do have to answer a few questions, maybe some of them a little uncomfortable. So unfortunately, that is still a requirement. But the big thing has been, but we want the contact hours. They're working with our students. We want that. It's ours. Give it to us. So I'm providing you with really rough guidance that we are working on formalizing that will come out in the CWC official way, but so that you can start preparing for what this might look like for your program. So first, these are direct hours. These are not proxy hours because you are doing synchronous instruction. These students are working with an individual in real time. So just because they're not directly in the same location as that individual virtual doesn't mean they're proxy. Proxy means we're not sitting in the same location, or we're not working maybe in real time. All of the instructors for the distance learning call center, which for those who have had students call in, give them kudos. They're a great group of folks, small group of folks right now. They're all valid, meaning they have all the credentials, all the professional development. They adhere to all of the TWC rules and guidelines. So we put our heads together, and this is why I'm saying it's really rough guidance, because this is literally a culmination of kind of what we've talked through at a few different meetings on how this might work. But what we have come up with is that you would essentially enter into some kind of agreement. It doesn't have to be a contract, it could just be an MOU with StudentNet to use their staff as volunteers, because you're not paying them. We are. We will add an initial record in Teams, meaning we'll deal with all the SSN nonsense to get them added into the system as a record, but you would need to add them as an employee volunteer under your system. So they would be a volunteer when you select that volunteer option. You would set up a class. You can set up one with all the instructors. So if you want, you can set up a StudentNet class or a distance learning call center class, whatever you want to call it. And you would set it up similar to how some of you have been doing your distance learning classes now, which is, you set up one class Monday through Sunday, all day, and you unlock the hours that they occur. That is assigned for this purpose. You then need to get a transcript from your student, which if we can close the loop a little better with program information, which we're still working on. For some folks it's really good, for some folks it's a little iffy. We might have a system where we can share that information back and forth, but again, that's a release of information. But you can actually get that information from the student. There's a really nice transcript of the system. It says what they've done, it says when they did it, it says how many hours they were doing it for, and you can log those hours into Teams as direct hours and keep that transcript as your assignment sheet, essentially. So that's one thing. So, yay! Hours for distance learning call center. No, I didn't get it in.
Oh, yeah, well, so here's kind of the story on this. When we conceptualized the distance learning call center,
instruction. Maybe that's a way to incentivize programs to use it. If we could make sure you get credit for your students calling the call center and essentially being instructed. So it's basically an adjunct to your program in terms of instruction. So that was a big eye-opener for us. Very, very different models than what we had conceived. So we're doing these things here to kind of build the value add. We're working it, so it's no cost to you, of course, so this is like free instruction. We are working with StudentNet because we would like to propose, continuing this on with our commissioners, kind of with this new model. So it's not really a distance learning call center because most of the students are not distance learning. It's not really a call center for just-in-time help. It's really becoming really a statewide instructional resource that's not even a resource, it's an instructional class. It's amazing if we can pull this off in terms of getting all the mechanics, but I just want to give you guys an update on that. So, what's next?
has been, getting that record number. We need that record number because that's how we identify who the student is, when they're calling into the learning call center to get that information, for them to be able to have and then to get back to you within the direct hours. We're pulling all of those, we're compiling all of those with the information we have to send students directly, their record number and information about the call center, as well as instructors' information on those participant record numbers for participants in their class. So that is one thing we're working on to be able to make things a little bit easier, because I know that's been a little bit tricky. But in terms of individuals you can target to utilize the call center, this is a great option for folks who are not yet ready in math, who maybe need just enough instruction to be ready. I know for sure looking at folks that are leaving the high school equivalency assessment centers who aren't math ready, to say, hey, here's an option. It's free, and it's really good to get them to where they kind of need to be for that high school equivalency. So one more important note, and this has to do with local and other funds. So when I say local and other funds, this obviously directly ties to local and other as they're listed in teams, and the guidance around using those has been a little squishy. We have worked really closely with our finance department to determine kind of what qualifying factors for utilizing these funds is and should be, and the allowability of us to report activities that are happening with money that isn't ours. So here's essentially the guidance we've gotten. And we've got an AEL letter of progress with this official in detail. You cannot count instructional time funded with local funds. If you are paying a teacher with some other grant, you cannot count that time. You can, but it won't count. Here's the logistics behind that. First, if you're using local funds, if you get some grant, we're really recommending that you use it for something that is not instructional time. If you want to use it for everything but the instructional time, awesome. You can absolutely do that. We encourage it, we love it, we support it. If you really, really, really are like, we've got it, we're going to use it, we're going to pay our teacher with it, you essentially have to cost allocate the hours for that particular class based on the proportion of time that that teacher is being spent with others. So to kind of explain that, if you have a teacher and you're doing 100% local funds with that teacher, all of those students are now local in teams and none of them will count. Versus if you pay 50% of that instructor's salary, 50% of those students need to be coded as other, and 50% of those students won't count. So really, really important for those of you who are utilizing outside funding sources for your instructional time. Now, this is not the case for training hours. Training hours are a little bit different because we know that folks utilize self-pay and other sources of funds, and those actual hours don't get counted quite the same way and don't get reported quite the same way related to performance as those direct contact hours do. But it's really important to keep that in mind. I do have a feeling you'll have some additional questions about this, but I want to move us forward. So if I can ask you a huge favor, hold your questions. We will answer them, I promise you, and address any concerns you might have related to this particular item. Since this has all been so fun, I want to do a raffle drawing, and since you all have survived with us until our last day, you get the best prizes. We are currently, during this drawing, going to be raffling off 2 $25 Amazon gift cards. So let's get the raffle going. Non-bought with our funds. Let me clarify. These were not purchased out of our group. That's true.
Goes to 201036. 201036. Going a third time. 201036. Follow-up number would be 201104. 201104. Another gift card. All right. Okay. The next card is 201040. 201040. Going third time, 201040.